There are a lot of expectations put on men in this day and age, especially since the COVID virus. Men have been elevated to a point of having to, I guess, perform, or they think they need to perform, which puts a lot of pressure on their mental health. On today's show, we're going to be talking about men's expectations with a guest from overseas, and we will look at how men can change that and use their expectations for the positive. Hi, this is Joey Buzzertil, and welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to Ben Winter, who's going to be talking to us about the expectations of men and how they can change their expectations for the better. Ben, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Like I was saying to you before we started, you're my first sort of international unknown guest. So congratulations for me and for you. Before we start, do you want to just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, some of your background?
Yeah, sure. I've done a lot of personal growth over the last 20 years, and in that I've found improv, which I do for fun. I also teach it, and I've actually created several books related to improv, and then that sort of spawns into the book that we're talking about, which is expectations. And I've traveled all over the world. I haven't made it down that far south yet, but the Galapagos is about as close as I've gotten to you guys. But that's about halfway there.
We'll
And
welcome you. We'll welcome you when you're ready to come. Don't worry.
all right, fair enough. Well, you guys are definitely on my list, that's for sure. But yeah, I've been to many places in the world. I love traveling. I have an 11-year-old kid, and he's growing and changing my world and perceptions and my expectations on a regular basis. So yeah, life is good.
That's good. So let's start off with the topic of expectations. Why do you think, as people, we have these expectations? And I guess why do people have expectations on us? What's your take on the expectation, I guess, philosophy or modality of how we put that on people and even put it on ourselves?
Yeah, so our expectations come from how we're raised or how we're not raised, which even then you could say that's how you were raised. Uh, when we see our parents, when we see society, when we see our friends, and we see how the world works around us, that's how we assume it works. When you grow up with parents who stay married, you just assume people get married and they stay married. It's not until your friend comes along who has a divorced mother and father, and you're like, I don't know what that means. Like it doesn't click. And so our reality is based on how we're raised. And so when we grow up, we're often confronted, whether we want to or not, with other people's views and versions of the world that contradict what we grew up with. And therefore that kind of sets off those expectations for us, saying, whoa, wait, that's not how life works. Wait a second, hold on. And so that's how we put expectations on other people too,
Mm.
is we assume, because this is how we grew up, that that's how you are supposed to respond, react, to be in this situation. And when you're not, whoa, my world's being thrown upside down. So
Mm,
it
mm.
it all comes from everybody kind of coming from their own background and then coming together. And uh
And
yeah.
and I guess it's also like I was listening to you, and I'm Maltese, I'm Catholic, and so all those expectations were put on. I remember like being young, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud before, but I remember my mum pulling me aside once and saying, "I think you should become a priest." Right? So there's there's these expectations that can come from all these different things. I mean, you mentioned friend and the realization. What do you think happens to someone that doesn't have that? Do you think that their reality becomes distorted to the point that they become pleasing, or they satisfy other people rather than looking at themselves?
It can happen many different ways. I mean, just if you look at siblings in the same household growing up, they are going to be two completely different people with two completely different perspectives of the world. Yet they grew up in the same household. So whether you have friends, a family that is, I'm going to say, loving and caring, it doesn't really change things, because sometimes we want to emulate what we grew up with, and sometimes we want the exact opposite. How many times do we hear a story of somebody who grew up in poverty and they became a millionaire because they didn't want their kids to have poverty? Like they wanted something different in life, so they chose
Mm,
the opposite of what they grew up with. So whether you have friends that influence your thoughts and beliefs and actions and how you experience the world, or not, you had something to form that little image that you hold on to on a regular basis.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I guess, yeah, I'll ask you a question about that later because I am interested about. I'm interested about how what you know. Oh, I might as well ask it now. Like, what do you think drives um, people to do that? Because I know from my family, I'm like the black sheep, right? Like, I left the suburb. I went to live overseas. I went to do all that stuff. So there was exactly what you're saying. I had this different desire to live my life differently to my parents, while my siblings all live in the same suburb. They all, stay around the same people. So, is there anything chemical, or is it just the person? Like, what causes someone to do that? You think?
Yeah, I mean, if it's chemical, I don't have any idea. Like that's not something that I've studied. It's possible. I just kind of feel like the way we kind of go about our lives, we decide that some things are worth it and some things aren't. Like when I look at my parents, I do not want to have a relationship like they have when it comes to a romantic partner,
Mm,
because it doesn't feed my wants and desires. Like I see them and they're not very affectionate towards one another. I want a relationship where it's more affectionate. So that would be kind of an opposite situation. Why do I want that? Maybe I didn't get the affection that I wanted when I was a kid. Maybe not.
yeah.
It,
Maybe I
you know,
think
it's,
I think it's awareness. I think that some people are
yeah,
aware and other people are complacent because, like, it is. We could talk about that this whole for a whole podcast, can't we? The whole,
yes,
I'm
yes,
aware and I want more versus being complacent. Um, in your book, which we will just for everyone to know, I'll put a link down below here so everyone who wants to buy it or interested in it, you can click on that link and get to it. But you talk about how we can turn negative expectations into positive ones. I guess, like you're saying. So, how does someone who may not have much experience in doing that, how do they start to utilize that opportunity? Because that's what I see it as, it's an opportunity. What's your take on that?
So let's define a negative expectation, because expectations in and of themselves are not positive or negative.
Yeah,
They're just an expectation.
yeah.
And we can decide whether it's positive or negative based on whether or not it serves us in that situation.
Well, can I?
So if
What if I give you an example? What if someone says,
yeah,
"I can't, like, I can't become a lecturer, or I can't become, I can't go into politics because I don't feel like I can do that." But it's really it's a negative expectation that they're putting on themselves, based on, I guess, maybe people around them telling them that they're stupid, or all that sort of stuff. So it's that sort of thing where
yeah,
they feel that they can't, but we know in reality that they can.
yeah. So, I mean, if you take it from the perspective of that thought process of I can't do something because everybody told me I can't, then once you're aware of it, then then you can do something about it. I think back to what you said about awareness. You have to be aware of what's happening before you can make any change. And so, one of the beautiful things about negative expectations in this kind of case is that they typically spawn a moment of being upset. And when you're upset, it's because that expectation isn't going met. Um, or, it's like, yeah, no, I'm not good enough to be in politics, or yeah, I'm not good enough to be doing what that guy is doing, even though I think it's the coolest thing ever. Like, or I'm not good enough to be an actor, whatever it might be. Once we're aware that that's happening for us, we can take that moment in time and practice something different. Now, I'm not going to be the one that fluffs people up and says, you can take that moment, you can completely change your life and switch it around in that moment and be successful. It's never that easy. Everybody
No.
wants it that easy. It's a matter of practicing every time it comes up so that
Yeah.
you don't come across it as often.
Yeah. But I'm guessing that I know that I agree with you. It's not easy because it sounds like you and I have maybe been through this whole process. But don't you think? Did you look back and go, "Oh my god, that was actually easy"? Did you, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like I remember when I first got a job lecturing, and I thought I can't do that, right? And then I had anxiety for a long time, and then when I actually got up there, I realized, oh my god, this is easy. And all those years, I stopped myself. So I think sometimes people do put themselves into that position because I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm generalizing, but there is a part of them that maybe gets something out of it by staying there because it means that they don't fail. They don't take that risk. Do you,
Exactly. I
do you
mean,
think that's
my
true?
absolutely. I look back before doing improv for the first time, thinking I was not smart enough, fast enough, I wasn't funny enough, every reason why I could not do improv. And then I took my first improv class, and it was so easy.
Yeah,
It was,
and
I just
you're
took
probably
to it.
really good at it, right?
Absolutely. The first thing they say in improv class is you need to follow the rules of improv. If you follow the rules, you'll be successful.
Mm,
I'm like, well, that's nobody said there were rules to improv. If I'd known that, I would have jumped on board a long time ago.
mm.
Uh, and yeah, so in retrospect, yeah, it was super easy once I made the choice. And sometimes it takes making little choices before you get to that bigger choice, back to where you have to practice on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think like I'm a therapist, so I know that part of my job is to help people to do what you just said. Do you think that that is a positive thing for people to realize that they've got maybe a lot of self talk, a lot of negative talk, that they should sort of go and seek help, or do you think that everyone is able to get through it on their own?
Everybody's different. Some people need the
True.
help, some people are able to do it themselves. And but it goes back to awareness. Once unless you're aware that there's an issue, you're not even going to be willing to change or do
Yeah,
anything different.
I
You
love
so
it.
you got to start with the acceptance and awareness. So
Yeah, I mean that's it's the basis of how I see tell what I work with my clients is that if you don't have a why, which is the reason, and you don't then connect with the awareness, you can try everything possible, but nothing's going to change. Is it? In this day and age, what do you think are some of the expectations that are being placed on men in general? Like, I guess since Me Too and all the changes that started to happen, do you feel like men have been placed under expectation watch?
oh yes, yes, yes. It's interesting because men are still expected to kind of follow the gender roles to start with, and at the same time they're expected not to. They're expected to let go of certain things, let go of certain aspects of familiarity as being a man, and the expectations that men are. You said the Me Too movement. The expectations for men right now are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do or not do. It's
Yes.
like, our entire worlds have been questioned, some for the good. Don't get me wrong. I see some of the things that men are doing out there, and I'm like, you're ruining it for everyone
Yeah, you're
by
right. It is for the good
doing
for
that.
some, isn't it? It's I think we need
Yeah.
there needs to be certain shifts, like this the whole sexual inequality thing. I agree with that. What can you give us an example of what you think is something that's gone out of it's been blown out of proportion? Like, some one of those expectations that because when you said that there is the expectations to change and then there's the expectation to be a man, it's like it feels like a tug of war being taken place. So do you have an example of what that could be? Like what how a man could be being pulled and pushed at the same time?
Yeah, so I mean, when I say that, I think about, like, let's take dating for example. Somebody's going out on a date. Do they pay or do they not pay? If we go back
Good.
far enough, it was always the guy that paid at the date, and now it's
Mm,
like, well, they want gender equality, but then they don't want gender equality, and then it's like, uh, what do I
yeah,
do? Right?
yeah,
It's as simple as something like going out on a date. I've heard people who complain about their door being held open for them. And,
yeah.
I grew up as that's just good manners. That's not even about being a man or a woman.
Mm,
That's just something the first person
yeah.
to the door holds the door open.
Yeah, you'd probably
But
open it to a man too, wouldn't you? You would open the door
yeah,
to anyone.
I
Yeah, I agree on the same.
but we're in this weird day and age where it's like, do I or don't I? And I just kind of go to the point of like, if I feel like I'm doing a good thing and I'm helping society, I'm helping a person, uh, then I'm going to keep doing it. If they're not happy about it, fine. If they're
Yeah.
going to be upset about it, they probably have something else they need to work on.
Mm,
Um, and I just tell people, I'm like, just be a good person, don't be a jerk.
I love that.
And I think the world is just going to be a better place because
Mm,
we have too many people who are not doing that.
yeah. What about being a dad? Like I'm not a father. For you, are there, I remember the day when I'll never forget this day when I was working and I heard for the first time in my life that a man was taking paternal leave, right? He was gonna stay at home, and my mind went blew away. So, what are some of the things that you've noticed once you became a dad that were expectations?
So a lot of the expectations are, providing for the family, and this is me kind of dating my. I'm in my early 40s, so I still grew up where gender roles were still kind of a thing. They were starting to be played with a little bit in the 80s of like, no, the more and more equality as time was going on. Um, but the way that I grew up, I saw my dad going out and providing. My mom was kind of the stay at home. Uh, and so when my son was born, I still had that kind of mentality of like, I am the provider. And
Mm,
my wife at the time wanted to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom. So it's almost like we kind of put ourselves in those gender roles. But now that we're divorced and we're co-parenting and we have, 1 week on, 1 week off, I have to take on all the roles when he's
yeah,
with me.
okay. Yeah, that's true. Because I was going to actually
And
ask you, when you were together, did you share the roles of the child rearing? And then, did you then take that on? Because I've heard of some men that have never done that, and then when they separate and they've got to do it by themselves, they totally melt down because they have no idea what to do.
yeah, no, we did a very good job of like co-creating um the parenting that we wanted for our child. So the emotional intelligence, the ideas of, when a kid falls down, are they really hurt?
Mm,
Or are they responding to the fact that the parent's always thinking that they're hurt?
yeah,
A lot of times a kid will stand, you'll watch them. They'll fall down, they'll look around, and when they make eye contact with the parent, then they'll start crying because
yeah.
it's a learned behavior for them. It's
Mm,
like, oh, I'm supposed to cry, even though I'm not hurt. I got to find mom and then I got to start crying, as opposed to wait and see. Because that's how we did it with our son. Is like we he fell down. Let's see if he's crying.
yeah.
And now he will take a big. He plays lacrosse. He'll take a big giant hit to the arm. He'll fall down. He'll get back up. No big deal. Like he
Yeah.
hurts himself all the time, but it's not like this screaming, "I have to
Mm,
go run for mom" sort of thing.
yeah.
So yes, there was a lot of co-creation, and we both took our equal parts in raising the child. So yeah, as separated, I definitely have a better grasp on what I need to do and not do.
Yeah. When it comes to say personal expectations on others, so I'll give you the example of say your friends having a party and you're not invited, right? And so there's a mental expectation that you're invited, which I'm going to put down to self-acceptance and loving oneself because once we get, if we don't love ourselves, we're going to look outside of ourselves to find reasons why our life isn't the way we want it to be. How do we deal with those expectations, the ones that we put on other people to be better, more attentive, more connected to ourselves, when in reality we don't really know what's going on because there's evidence that they don't like us and our head can play all these tricks on us.
Yeah, that is an interesting example because I'm thinking about like how would I be in my past when I was a lot less self-confident, I would definitely think they were like basically subtly saying, I don't want you around.
Mm,
And so I would definitely take it personally. Knowing what I know about people right now with the world that we live in, it's very possible they just forgot. And
probably,
you kind of have to
probably do,
check
yeah.
in. Are they really good friends? Are they more like acquaintances? Like, are you? And I don't know. Like, I've reached a point in my life where if I was like, why wasn't I invited? I would probably jokingly say, like, hey, dude, have fun at your party tonight. Um, just like not even make it a thing. And then they might be like, oh, man, sorry, totally. You should come. Can you make it? I totally forgot. And then
Yeah. I'm
it
going
is
to
what it
maybe
is.
add, I'm just going to add an extension to that. I think that that would be probably the way that we should always communicate, shouldn't we? Because we don't with expectations. If you don't actually communicate, do you think that we just create assumptions, like you were given as an example there? Like our brain is so complex; it can come up with all these really twisted ideas. When I sort of see people, I think, why are you suffering? All you need to do is ask the person. But it's strange how people don't want to talk or ask because of the fear of rejection, which is another expectation. So it's
Yeah.
like we put all these expectations on ourselves. Do you think that expectations eventually lead to disappointment?
It depends on the expectations and how you handle them, on whether or not they reach a disappointment. So you touched on a lot of things there. one example that I've learned over the last 5 or 6 years is that if I text somebody and they don't text me back, I'm really good at making up why not. And I've never once been right. I've come up with 1,000 reasons,
Yeah,
and they'll come up with that one reason I never thought of. And, there was no reason whatsoever that I had to really concern myself with it.
yeah,
So I could have set myself up for disappointment a lot. And I'm choosing to like recognize I've never been right once about those things that I've made up. So maybe now I can just practice patience and then see if they
yeah.
respond.
I think it's
And
a
if they
really good
don't,
point, isn't it? It's a good because people. What was your time limit? Like
uh
'cause people now are like really upset if you don't
yeah.
text them straight away, aren't they?
Well, and that's what it was. Like back then it was like I always had my phone. I was always replying really quickly. So when somebody didn't, it was like, what is happening? But now I'm like, it could be days. And I've reached a point of just letting it go. Like if I'm not that important to the person, why am I putting myself out there, sort of thing. If they text back, great. If I've misinterpreted somebody not sending me a text message, and 3 or 4 days later they're like, right after you sent that text message, I dropped it in the toilet, it stopped working, I had to get a new phone. And it's like, not once did I think maybe their phone just died because they flushed it down the toilet and they have to get a new one. Like
Yeah,
that didn't cross my mind, and that's happened to people. So we kind of have to give people the benefit of the doubt.
yeah,
And going back to the other piece that you were talking about of sharing expectations, that is one of the things that I wrote about and kind of created is this flow chart where it talks about like that moment in time when you're upset, and it asks you questions like, did you even know you had the expectation? Which most of the time we don't even know until we're upset. But one of the questions is, have you shared that expectation? And you hit on it with, there's a fear of rejection. As a That is one of the main reasons we don't share our expectations with others. Now,
mm,
another way you can think of it is setting a boundary with somebody. Setting a boundary is setting an expectation.
yeah.
Um,
But people are scared of boundaries as well.
exactly. So, what if I share this expectation? What if I share this boundary and I get rejected? But what's more important, setting that boundary, setting that expectation, or having that friendship that doesn't respect your boundary? And it becomes this really weird thing to practice.
Mm.
But yeah, we as society have so many ways to provide written word to one another, yet we suck at communicating.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of goes into my next point of like, how do we change that? And I guess you've just sort of answered it in a sort of way, and that is you need to set those expectations or those boundaries when it comes to, your partner, your family, your friends, your colleagues at work, all those sort of things. Because if we don't set those expectations, what we end up getting is, I guess, we're the ones that get hurt because we're the ones that are twisted in our own heads. Do you think that the solution to all this is self acceptance? Like loving oneself, not to feel like you're going to get judged or abandoned or all those things because when we put the emphasis on other people we are in a way letting go of ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, so self-acceptance is definitely part of the equation. I think a good way to approach this for people that aren't comfortable with it is to ask the other person first. Say, "Hey, what are your expectations or what do you think about this situation?"
Hmm.
Because then it opens up the door to dialogue. And then hopefully they're going to ask the same question in return saying, "Okay, well, here's what I think. What about you? What are your expectations? What are your boundaries?" And maybe the boundary they set, maybe the expectation they had was the exact same as yours. And now
Mm.
you don't have any reason to be afraid. Or what if their expectation is, I'm going to say, or their boundary is way more steep than yours, and you're totally okay with that. Um, and the opposite side of the fear is like freedom. What if you share an expectation of what you want in a relationship, and the other person's like, yeah, I'm game for that.
Yeah,
Now your relationship's taken to a whole new level.
that's it. I love that. You read my mind. I was going to say without that point step you don't go to that next level, and I think it's crucial in a relationship. I think that it is so many clients I see with men that have got all these problems and they will not tell their wives. And I'm thinking, why? But she's your wife. But it's
Yeah.
like that's why they keep being stuck on that merry-go-round. Um, do you think that some men have expectations on other men? Like I'm going to call it masculinity, okay? Even though I hate that word. Do you think there's this expectation that we need to start to let go of? Like, like the way that men can do locker talk, and the way men can, describe certain things that aren't, deep down we know that they're not right, but yet sometimes we participate in them or we listen to them without bringing it up. Do you think that we're at a time in history that we're changing that?
I think having a general expectation of a group of people is stupid because we're all so different. There are men out there who think that, well, so I'm in the United States, that having guns and hunting makes you a man. And yay, Second Amendment in the United States. Okay. I don't have a gun.
Mm.
I don't hunt. Like, does that make me any less of a man?
That's another
And
podcast in that as well.
right. And so I kind of feel like the expectations I'm going to have different expectations of that guy than he has of me. He's going to expect, somebody who's very much into guns and hunting and Second Amendment rights is going to just assume everybody around him has a gun as well and also believes the same things. Whereas myself, I'm like, I see no reason to have a gun. I've never needed one. I don't go hunting. So I just assume everybody around me doesn't have a gun
Mm.
until I see their truck with their NHRA or NRA stickers and their
NRA.
gun stickers, and I'm like, well, there's probably a gun in that truck.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just as silly to say like everybody who's black should like everybody who's black.
Mm.
Everybody who's white should like everybody who's white.
What
There are
about
plenty of
what about
yeah.
generalized masculine? Like, for example, men that go play sport and they talk very openly, say, about women's body parts, for example, right? Do you
Yeah.
think that we're at a time now when men are getting more intelligent? Like you used the word emotional intelligence, right? Like the men are going, "Hey, hold on, stop! Don't. That's not really fair." Do you think we're getting to that point? Because in
Yeah.
Australia, right, that talk is really big still. I don't know
Oh yeah,
about
no, I think
it's big
that's
there
just
too.
general guy talk.
Yeah.
I do think there are more guys standing up to that, but it's not as common as it probably should be.
Mm.
Uh, with the equal rights, the Me Too movement, all this other stuff, that's part of the toxicity that women don't want is the guys just treating women as an object. And that sort of talk is treating them like an object. And there are plenty of men who don't have the self confidence to stand up to their guy friends and say, "Guys, that's just not cool, not appropriate." Because if you stand up to your guy friends and they like talking about women that way, maybe now you're not invited to the next thing,
Yeah.
and now you lose those friends. So I think guys are hesitant to stand up to other guys about it, but at the same time, it's becoming more common, and as time goes on, it will continue to be more common.
Yeah, I want to give you an example of what happened in Melbourne, Australia, where I live. So there was we have trams here, and there was a tram full of 17-year-old students at a very well-established school, and the tram was packed, so they were all standing up there. And one of the boys in the school, wearing the uniform, started singing this really sexist song, and every boy was sang it, and it was videotaped and put online. It went viral. And so the argument was the pressure and expectations that those boys had, the younger boys had from their older student, men on the tram, that they felt they had to, and they were saying exactly the same thing that you were saying, that they were they're insecure and uncomfortable because if they didn't participate, there'd be bullying, there'd be ostracizing, there'd be all these things, right? So how do you think that example, for example, can impact mental health for men? Because that pressure is something that we need to, as men, need to help other men understand and get the confidence in, so they don't feel that they have to confine in behavior that's socially not acceptable.
That's a tough one, and I wish I had like the magic answer for that because
So I just
I
asked
mean,
you your opinion, because
yeah,
I know it's a tough one, because I personally don't think it's going to change for a very long time, because
no,
the school did nothing, governments aren't doing nothing, so those boys in a way got away with it. So but as an individual, what do you think we can do to help other men understand that? Hold on a second, we need to change the way that we expect our behavior to be.
if we can somehow teach our youth how to be more self confident, I think that's going to solve a lot of problems because the teenagers in this situation, there may be one out of 100 that's actually truly self confident. The others are all just trying to fit in, figure out their place in life. It's the common thing that happens with kids. One of the things that has brought me very uh, a lot of self confidence is learning improv,
Mm,
and there's so many tools in improv that I feel like really help with self confidence that it should be taught in schools at a younger age, so that as they grow up, when the bully does their thing or when somebody says something, they're not freaking out about it. They're able to use it and turn it around and play with it. Because, I mean, we improvise every moment of every day of our lives. And as I said, when I took improv, I learned the rules of improv and it made everything easier. Not just being up on stage, it made life easier.
mm.
So if kids can have an easier life, they're less likely to conform in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, which speaks to mental health and self confidence.
Mm,
So I say get improv in schools. That's
yeah.
my solution to the
I did improv as well. So you and I improv buddies. I agree with you. Like improv, well, I did acting, not improv, but that totally changed my life because it did give me confidence. But you said something earlier, I think, which is the theme of this whole podcast, and it is we need to understand where we came from. So if we have, entitlement, if we have parents that are racist or sexist, then those things are going to be with us. And so if we notice that as a man or, as a boy or someone listening, it's about just being comfortable to speak up and say to that person, hold on, there's another option. There's another way of seeing things. And that's how I think it starts to spread. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's a one-on-one conversation. I mean, we've proven beyond any sort of doubt that trying to convert the masses and explain something with information and facts to the masses does not work. Pull your friend to the side and have a real conversation with them, that might change things.
Yeah.
So we have to go back to this. I know it's a new thing. Communication is new, but we got to go back to it and we got to
Yeah.
get better at it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Women can do it in the masses, but men can't yet. Men still need to have that one-on-one sort of private chat to sort of be emotional and to speak up. But I do, in the group that I run, I do see the change happening. Um, Ben, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us. It's been really interesting. Before you go, do you want to just give your book a plug? And then, as I said, I will make sure that everything is linked down below.
Yeah, sure. So the book that I wrote is called "What to Expect When Having Expectations." It is a play on words with the "What to Expect When Expecting" books that are out there, but um, this one's not about babies.
and,
So
and where can they get it from? Is it available at every platform like Amazon and so on?
yeah, so it might be easiest just to go to havingexpectations.com. You
Okay,
can learn
perfect.
more about it. You can download the flow chart I talked about for free, and then you can find links to the book there.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ben, we'll keep in touch and hopefully we'll get to speak to you again sometime in the future and good luck with everything in the US.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good, I guess it's Friday for you.
Friday morning, yeah. This
All
is
right.
the Secret Men's Business podcast. So don't forget the new podcast. This podcast will be out on Monday and we're doing retro podcasts on Thursday. So you can get to hear all of the library and actually catch up with any of the podcasts you haven't heard. Don't forget to hit subscribe and we'll see you all next time. Bye, guys.